it's one of those great things about racing, isn't it? You get behind the riders and the stories and the personalities just as much as you get behind, the actual sport and what happens on track. But with Jonathan Rea, and Rossi said this as well, he thinks Rea could still be fast if he was given a MotoGP opportunity. Do you think it's probably too late now?
100% too late. And why would you? Everything's in place for Jonathan at the moment. Retirement is the only next thing for Jonathan at the end of the day. Uninjured, hopefully, family life. He's got a house on Phillip Island. He's got connections everywhere he would want to be. I mean, he can disappear like Casey Stoner and enjoy himself. I mean, whatever his expectations out of his later life are, hopefully uninjured, and I'm touching wood as I say it. What a wonderful career. Why would you want to go and risk it? That's the other thing. We talk about the transition period between BSB, World Superbike, and MotoGP. You are going to ramp up, and I mean it's exponential. When you get to MotoGP, it is a pressure cooker. Does he want that? I don't know at what point, say Peter, where you ran out of steam, where you relaxed a bit in your life. When you're 18, you're trying to rip all the plants up and get everything done. And then slowly but surely you get to your late 20s and, there's this kind of a little bit of desperation sneaks in for wanting to get that deal done, whatever it is in life, in your personal life, in your professional life, whatever it might be. Then you're in your 30s and you start to sort of roll back just a fraction by the time you get to 30. In my case, I didn't until I got into my 40s, actually, but I always was late thinking. But most people are starting to. What's that old saying? If you ain't made it by the time you're 35, you ain't going to make it. That probably, as a majority goes, is not a bad way of thinking it. You've got to start to relax. Your lot is about done in sport, particularly by the time you're 35. Would you want to take on, the kind of when you ride a MotoGP bike, you have got to be prepared to crash every corner. Those guys are on the absolute limit. Now, Jonathan Rea is an artist on that Kawasaki. I mean, he floats that bike through corners. He is brilliant on it. He's got a combination, a team setup, and a riding style that absolutely suits. To junk all of that and go off, not on a whim, because it's not. I'm sure he will have thought about it over many years, to MotoGP. If it's a burning desire he's got and he can't live without actually doing it, then he'll have to do it. But I don't think Jonathan is there for that. I think he'll finish his time in World Superbike. Guessing.
That's all he could do.
And of course the question mark now is Toprak, isn't it? Toprak's in a very different position. And we know that he wants to be a World Superbike champion before he goes to MotoGP. And now it looks like he has an excellent chance of becoming that champion this year. Does that mean that something could yet happen for next year in MotoGP? I'm unsure on that. I think that the big thing holding back there is the spec of the bike, isn't it? It seems like there will only be these 3 factory Yamahas. I don't think Toprak's going to move across on a year-old bike. Why should he? As we've mentioned, there's enough reasons, why he will want the latest equipment and feel he deserves it. And it's strange, isn't it? It's almost like sometimes MotoGP wants Toprak more than Toprak wants MotoGP. He seems quite casual about it, doesn't he?
Hard to get.
A lot of it's got to be down to Kenan Sofuoglu. I mean, I love the spat between Kenan Sofuoglu and Aleix Espargaro. 2 men at the opposite ends of the empathy scale. I love it. You've got Aleix Espargaro, who's in touch with his buddy, whatever he's in touch with, but he's the one that got to have safety, got to have this, got to have that, got to, everybody's got to be wrapped in cotton wool, rah, 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 rah. And he has every right to ask for the things he asks for as a professional sportsman, of course. But then you've got the other side of the scale, particularly at the moment where Kenan Sofuoglu has come out in the defence of Dennis Onchu, who got the 2-race ban because he wiped half the field out in one go. And you know what? This is going to be controversial, and I will stick my neck above the turret because I don't care. Dennis Onchu got penalised severely, but you feel almost like he was made an example of, because I've seen worse moves than that. I have seen more moves than that. Then the one thing that annoys the absolute hell out of me, and I was going to swear, but I know we have youngsters listening as well. This inconsistency, this 1 minute we're down on draconian, penalties for the likes of Onchu for the move he made. Yeah, he did pinch a bit of his braking line, but I have seen that so many bloody times. from Valentino Rossi, from Marc Marquez, particularly when he was in the smaller classes. I know we've moved on a bit since then, and our awareness in the rules and our awareness has changed slightly through management. On Shoe, Kenan Sofuoglu came out in defence and basically said, yeah, youngsters, they do that. I suppose where he's wrong is it's off the back of 3-4 youngsters that we know of, that Filipino that was killed in Thailand just a couple of weeks ago, as well, in the 150 underbone races. I think coming off the back of that is a little bit insensitive of Kenan to perhaps go public with such a comment. But I can understand where he's coming from, and I can understand, I believe there will be more people that will think like Kenan than are actually holding their hand up at the moment. Aleix is the one on the opposite side, and thank words to the effect of, I can't remember what they were now, but something along the line, thank heavens we don't have this guy in the MotoGP paddock. Well, you might be getting him in the MotoGP paddock soon if Toprak gets the right ride. And I can see momentum behind Razgatlioglu to come into the MotoGP paddock. There will be a way at some stage. Interesting conversations as well. Frankie Carcetti eventually made it to BSB. He was supposed to be coming to Alton Park. You remember the Jake Dixon? Is he going to BSB or is he going to Moto 2? He turned up at Brands Hatch and was giggling with me about it because I'd broadcast that he was at Alton Park. He said, I weren't. I was watching it on telly. So they've basically got Jake Dixon into a Moto 2 ride, obviously. That deal's done. But some very interesting comments that came about developments on motorbikes and how the Ducati, from his perspective, and believe me, he's got a better perspective than any of us have got because he's in there all the time, how that Ducati is just, he said, that bike with the right guy on it or the right momentum behind it should be winning everything. It's so far ahead in development. The whole shot device, I mean, I love it when I talk to someone who's on the ground, who knows what they're talking about. When you talk about the whole shot device, we all go, yeah, the whole shot device, yeah, that's gets you off the line and all the rest of it, and then we can't kind of work out why that bike is going so well in a straight line. Why does it go so well in a straight line? I mean, I never really worked that out, but as it sits down, it takes the rider out of the wind a little bit. And here comes the real trick that we all should have thought about, because it is rocket science, but it ain't rocket science, really. As it sits down, it alters the angle of attack of the wing. So it's its own drag reduction system because it doesn't. You've got less drag as it sits the back down of the bike. You've got less drag, and again exponentially. The drag is everything. The faster you go, the more drag you've got on anything, car, bike, bloody push bike, whatever it might be. So when you're reducing drag by lowering the thing down at the back, and I went like a thicko. I remember I stood in the camp going, oh yeah. It's actually quite obvious, really, when you think about it. It moves the rider down so that the flow of air over him is a better flow of air, and it reduces the attack of the wings on the front of the bike. So the wings on the front of the bike, when it's in a braking situation, in a corner situation, is giving you the kind of downforce you really need. But the second you drop the old drag reduction thing, flattens it out, and you've got a smooth motorbike through the brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Ducati as well, the way they've got over you must mechanically, manually activate this thing. It can't be done electronically. How they've got over it? Anybody that's raced motorbikes in the past will remember that you always put an O-ring over your fork leg, don't you? The difference, of course, is that fork legs are up the other way nowadays compared with the ones I had. They're now what we used to call a long time ago upside down forks. So the thick bit is up the top and the bit that goes in and out is underneath, whereas it used to be the other way around in the old days. But either way, you always put an O-ring on your fork leg so that you can see how much compression, where you are actually compressing that fork to under braking. Good old Gigi Dell'Igna and the boffins at bloody Ducati have worked out a way of hydraulically triggering this thing to go down. So when you're accelerating, when the forks extend, so the tube comes out, it gets to a point and triggers the back end down. And likewise, when you hit the brakes,
slots back in.
Bing.
Oh my!
The problem that Suzuki have is because they're in incarnation number one of the whole shot device. is that, say, somewhere like Misano, turn 10, you come out of turn 10, it sits down. But, of course, you don't hit the brakes when you get to Cavone, which is turn 11, which is 145, 50 mile an hour through Cavone. And the last thing you freaking need is the back end sitting down when you get in there. So if it hasn't released, you're in big trouble and giving you the balance back of the bike, because you are flying through that particular part of the course at Misano, where we're going next. So Suzuki can't use it. And Suzuki's is heavy. It's 2.5 kilos or something, whereas everybody else's is like half that weight now. So despite the fact Frankie Carcetti took a bloody long time to get to the VSB paddock, he was quite useful when he got there.
They're a smart bunch, those Ducatis. Well, did you get any update on Jake Dixon? Did he give you anything?
No, I mean, again, and because it's a friend situation.
Yeah.
It's always. I mean, like, it all comes out in the wash. I mean, I think sometimes. This is where I get annoyed a little bit with social media and the media in general, is that everybody's falling over themselves to bloody well spit the details out there, when really, do we need to? It's just a competition in the media.
Yeah, it'll all come out.
To get it out there first.
Yeah.
And I think we're all going to know in good time, and we're all going to get it, and we're all going to, see where it goes. I mean, I think I've just bloody buried Frankie Carcetti for giving me information on stuff just now. So the last thing I want to do is bloody blurt out something before they've had the official release. And again, as do I consider myself a journalist now? I mean, if you leak stuff, you never get the stories ever again. So keep your powder dry, I think, is the name of the game. Unless Pete's got something that's official.
No, nothing official. No. The rumor at COTA was Dixon will be with the Aspar team, which he was with when he first came into Moto2. So we will wait for something official.
Well, Keith's rumour corner. That's that segment over for this week. Actually, and just to cut,
it might not be over yet.
No,
it might be.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's funny. We talk about media. We spoke about Aleix espargaro. I saw those tweets and I screenshotted them because I knew they'd come in handy. Just because I thought they might pop up. He was a bit feisty. It was great. We do love a bit of drama.
Aleix is the most feisty man. I mean, Aleix is the kind of guy that you can imagine at some stage in the United Nations or somewhere. He'd be fighting for some cause.
Oh, good on him. We all need a bit of emotional.
Himself.
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about Aleix is he'll answer any question and he'll give you a straight answer. He'll tell you what he thinks. And he knows that not everyone's going to agree with him, but he'll tell you anyway. And whether you agree with that or not, that's the sort of person, Keith was talking about the different paddocks and the corporate nature of certain things. This is what you want. You want riders to give their opinion freely, whether people are going to agree with that or not. So, and Aleix will always do that. There's very few occasions where he'll say, "Oh, I'm not touching that question." So, yeah, I think he's happy to sort of roll his sleeves up and get involved in social media. He's one of the few riders, of course, who does his social media himself. There's a lot of people that they have people that do it for them, of course. So.
We love Aleix.
He doesn't have a man that does it for him. It always makes me laugh. It makes me laugh. The helmet polishers. I love the helmet polishers in the paddock. There is a special person just to polish your helmet for half an hour.
Well, what's are the rates good? I've got some free time at the moment.
Unbelievable. Honestly, Harry, you wouldn't believe
Really?
it. I mean, we're talking about 40 or 50 grand for a helmet polisher.
I'm in the wrong career. Absolutely in the wrong career. We started this conversation, just to bring it back, with Toprak and possibly his MotoGP starts. And Barry Allen has asked a direct question. So, Pete, I think you've made your opinion pretty clear on that. You don't think he's going to accept a below par seat in MotoGP. But Barry has asked Keith, "Hi guys, I love the podcast. My question is, if Toprak wins the Superbike title, do you think he will fill the 4th Yamaha seat in MotoGP?"
I don't think. I think he'll have a defence in World Superbike, much to my annoyance, I've got to say, because I don't agree. I think he should go to MotoGP while he's hot. There are not a lot of bloody chances in MotoGP. Keenan. I understand Keenan. He's a tough guy. Keenan. He's a ruffian of the supersport mould. Whatever bike he rode in MotoGP management, MotoGP people see what the talent is. If you're finishing in 10th place, they are seeing whether you are maximising your potential. If he came there and was a 10th place man all the time, they would know whether that was down to the bike or down to the rider. It ain't going to be down to the rider. I think Razgatlioglu has got great potential. And he's got that kind of feel for a motorbike at the moment when the thing is out of control, it's still in control. And I love that. He's just got that special quality that you don't see very often. And that will translate really well across the MotoGP. I don't understand Yamaha. I've never understood the way that Yamaha go about their business. They always seem to be too little, too late with everything they do. It always seems to be late. The only reason we got the Petronas team is because the bloody factory team was getting his ass kicked everywhere, and they wanted a team that was going to be a ladder for new talent, and also to sort of develop a separate strategy from the main factory team. But it was too late. The test team, I know we got wrapped up in pandemics and all the rest of it, so I shouldn't perhaps go there quite so harshly. But the test team, what bloody test team? Do they do any? It's just, it never seems to, Yamaha always seem to be slightly behind the game. Ducati manage it, and next year it's going to be a nightmare for everyone. How many Ducatis have we got on the grid? They're going to be pumping some bikes out that are worth having. And picking up 8 bike data as opposed to 3.5 bike data, if you like, at Yamaha. It just doesn't seem right. Suzuki are vulnerable at the moment, I think. I don't think Suzuki's developments are looking all that sharp. I think Suzuki have relied on the same bike for a while, really. And they might find themselves in trouble for next year. There's been a lot of development going on, chassis-wise, aero-wise, cooling-wise, all the bits and pieces that hardly look anything from a quick glance, but a lot of stuff's going on. And when we get the engine developments come on for next year, it's going to be interesting. And engine development, it can affect everything. I mean, a good example of it is Josh Brooks. I mean, again, we go back to the BSB situation. I've been very lucky to be. This is the access you get at BSB. Here he is, Josh Brooks, multiple winner. He didn't win a race at the weekend. And this is the first year since 2012 Josh Brooks has not won a race in the season. And the reason for that, when they got their new motors, the new Ducati motors, he tells me, now I didn't ask Paul Bird, who would probably say this isn't the case, because he's spending 25 grand a motor and he's got 18 of them sat on his workshop floor. The fact of the matter is that Brooks says that the upgrades that they got, the new motor that they've got, doesn't allow him to ride it the way he wants to ride it. They've made all the chassis adjustments they can make and all the things that they've tried, but the motor operates in a manner that doesn't allow him to ride the motorbike in the way that he wants to ride it. And I think the reason I'm mentioning that is because that's what we're going to see a lot of next year. All these developments that are coming through, people have been altering a little bit of chassis, a little bit of aero, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, fine-tuning everything and getting it ready for the whatever power plant development they've got for next year. But we're going to see a real difficult early start to the season because they've not got much testing to do. All this new stuff is going to be like, it's almost going to be like run what you brung. Once we get to Qatar and they shut off the limit. I think I said last time, I think they should have a later limit. I think they should have, be allowed to develop. Everyone should be allowed to develop in the first 2 or 3 meetings in 2022. So we do see the full potential of what people have got. Not just rely on we raced it in Qatar, so bang, clamp it all together, put a seal on it, and that's what you got to use for the rest of the year. I think that's the wrong way to go after such a long technical freeze.
And we've seen this before, Keith, with Suzuki, which is maybe why they're a little bit cautious. After Vinales won their first race during that great season he had, they lost concessions. So then they joined the other factories with the technical freeze, and they went the wrong way with the engine. They chose the wrong engine. They went with the internals were a lot heavier. They had Alex Rins coming in as a rookie, Iannone coming in. Rins got injured in his first test, I remember, at Valencia, so he was sort of out the way. They picked an engine and then they got into the season and realized, I think basically the internals, they made them a bit heavier to make it a bit smoother, but it caused them problems. And then they were stuck with it for the entire season. So exactly what you're saying, Keith, that if you go the wrong way during this winter testing, you've got to somehow then do what you can to patch that, work around the problem. But really they weren't able to solve that problem until they had a new engine the following year. So I think maybe that's also just at the back of their mind at Suzuki, that they don't want to do the wrong step again. But maybe the risk of that is that you can be too careful. And we've seen that Mir, let's be honest, as a reigning champion, we expected him to be winning races this year, didn't we? He's now staring down the barrel of not winning a race as the reigning champion. And I think there's some frustration there from him, because he's been saying things like, I feel I'm riding better. Well, that can only mean that the bike has not improved at the same rate as the others, doesn't it? So I think that there's a lot of question marks at Suzuki. That there's expectation from the riders. They want to do better. Rins is under pressure after these mistakes he's made this year as well. So I think there's some big decisions to make over this winter. And, that fine line of making a big step, but don't take the wrong step.
Oh, tricky one, that's for sure. I think I better put a call into Danny Aldridge, technical director at IRTA, and see what they've got up their sleeve, because they're a clever bunch of people. They're not going to leave the teams in a situation. Of course, the manufacturers will have to agree to whatever they decide to do when it comes to a rule situation. Basically, the manufacturers underwrite the rules, and then it is interpreted and put in the rule book by, the likes of Danny Aldridge and IRTA and Dorna. They kind of sanction what the manufacturers have collectively decided is correct in the way of the process. If we remember back that, talking about snappy motors, the Honda, Repsol Honda motor is the snappiest of them all. And at the end of the day, when they went to the spec electronics, Honda didn't want to go there at all. And from that point onwards, it was only bloody Marquez who could ride the sodding thing, because it was like, one of the hardest bikes in the world to run with that slightly less sophisticated electronics package that was voted through in the end. What was that story? I always smile at this one, like it was Honda to Carmelo Espeleta, the CEO at Dorna, was, if you sort of force upon us the electronics package, then we'll go to World Superbikes and concentrate our efforts in World Superbikes. But at that time, I think unbeknown to many, Dorna had just gained the rights to World Superbikes, which was, well, all right, if you want to then. It did make me smile at the time. Internal politics behind the scenes.
Well, here's a question for you from Will and Jan on this. She's gone, hi guys. If Dorna wanted to attract more manufacturers, wouldn't it be a good idea, like this season, to give the manufacturers without concessions a development freeze for a year so other brands can fill the gap like Aprilia did this year?
Well, that's how it works. Yeah. That's how it is, isn't it? It's actually like that because of the brands that are getting on the podium lose concessions, and the ones that haven't get them in a roundabout kind of a way. I understand. I mean, Dorna have been very good over the years. In fact, MotoGP, I mean, there was less money going to the factory teams than went to, say, Paget's of Batley. Great family, great story. If you don't know anything about Paget's of Batley, you've got to look it all up, because Peter and Don Paget, the two brothers, and Clive Paget of late, of course, fantastic people, responsible for bringing on so many domestic races and so on, and in Grand Prix. But for an example, Paget's would get 1.5 mil for running a team as a package to go racing in Grand Prix, and the factory boys would get $1 million. It was lopsided. It's not like in bloody race in Formula One, Harry, where the richest team, which is Ferrari, get the most money and the most concessions to do whatever they want to do because of the Concord Agreement, whatever that is. And you end up in a situation where the balance is all wrong. But in MotoGP, it's been right for some years. And I think Dorna, CRT series. I mean, you can go, I hated CRT absolutely with a passion. The claiming rules teams. I mean, even the name is rubbish. CRT. Anyway, but it was there for a reason. It was a transition to get us into a better position. I couldn't see it, but I'm dim. Carmelo Espeleta, Dorna had got it all worked out, and look where we are now because of the way they have. I'll use the word manipulated, but I mean it in a positive term rather than a negative term. They manipulated the technical rules to get us to where we are across all three classes: Moto3, Moto2, MotoGP. I get asked all the time. I mean, the great thing again about BSB paddocks is you are, you can wander around and you actually get a real fans kind of, they ask you the questions that you don't normally get asked, and it's fantastic to be able to do to relay kind of where you see things going and understand how the fans see it as well. And I think that Dorna are recognised as doing a great package, but I think that they could do some things better, and we'll wait and see whether they've got that in hand. And I mean, I think that the development for the lesser teams, is it a lesser team? You can't even call it that. Anything that's within mostly a second of what the very fastest bikes are doing, is that a lesser team? You allow a team like Aprilia a concession too far, and they'll rule the roost. They'll allow them too much, and they will be the best and fastest motorbike. So you've got to be so careful what you do, and it is a real, high wire that Danny Aldridge and the rest of the technical guys have to walk to make sure that people get what they need to do the best they can do, and not get too much.
I think the concessions are, as you say, they're vitally important for you. You've got to balance keeping the manufacturers that are already in the sport happy and trying to make it accessible to new guys coming in, haven't you? Because it was so long where there was always rumors about other manufacturers coming in, but they didn't, because they look at the job that they faced in trying to match the guys at the front of the grid at that stage, and they would just go, you know what, it's just too big, And so the claiming rule teams, I think Dorna felt, when they introduced the CRT, that they felt a bit let down by the manufacturers, because they kind of let the manufacturers have their own way. And then suddenly there was this situation where there wouldn't be enough bikes on the grid. And so it was like, well, we've left you to it. And now we're in a situation where it was borderline. They would have enough bikes to run a world championship. So I think that was the moment where they went, look, we're going to take control of this. We're going to fill the grid with superbike powered CRT bikes, as you say. But not only that, that the say on what bikes are on the grid, what spec they are, all these concessions will be worked out amongst us all, not just the manufacturers anymore. And I think it was that change. That was the moment where sort of the power changed towards, let's say, the more racing side, the entertainment side, you might say, rather than just, well, we go racing because it's technical development. This is the products we want to sell. We have to have open electronic development and all these other things. That was where Dorna started to move things towards, well, look, you can have all that, but not at the expense of the racing and not at the expense of putting bikes on the grid. And I think the concessions have worked really well. I'm also surprised that Formula One hasn't gone down a similar route, to be honest. I think it would work there. You might say the ultimate goal maybe of the concession system would be to see a satellite rider win a world championship. That might be the moment where you say, everything is right. Now, obviously, the best riders tend to go to the factory teams because that's where the money is and everything else. But, we saw in 2020, Franco Morbidelli and Quartararo, they almost did it, so they proved that the rules are pretty equal between the factories and the satellite teams. And now we've seen Suzuki, we've seen KTM come through the concession system and go on to win races. We're seeing Aprilia rising up as well. So I think it's working pretty well. The big question mark is, as Keith raised before, we've had this extended technical freeze. This is where we're in a unique situation. It's not the normal technical freeze that was brought up in the question of just one season. This has been going back since the start of 2020. So we don't quite know what to expect when everything is unleashed at the end of this year and ahead of next season.
No, well, thank you, Willem, for that question. Great debate, as ever. Now, before we move on to looking properly ahead to this weekend's racing action, there's just to be a little bit of update of news, hasn't there, Pete, with what's going on with the World Anti-Doping Agency in Indonesia and Thailand. They have confirmed that the national flags of Indonesia and Thailand cannot be officially displayed at MotoGP, World Superbike, F1, or other any kind of major motor racing event until non-compliance has been lifted.